Welcome to Vogel Voices, a podcast put on by Vogel, which is a nonprofit here in Dallas, Texas. The purpose of the podcast is really to explain the impact that Vogel has on homeless children and their families here in Dallas. Hello and welcome to the Vogel Podcast, episode number 6. The purpose of this podcast is to let people know the importance of the work that's done by Vogel Alcove, a nonprofit in the Dallas area that serves homeless children and their families. Our mission is to help young children and their families prevent and overcome the traumatic effects of homelessness and poverty. We do this through several programs, which includes our early childhood program, our health program, our family support program, and our mental health program. My name is Karen Hughes. I'm the president and CEO of Vogel and have been so for the last 14 years. But today I'm joined by two of our staff members, Scott Nutter, who is our Director of Food Service, and Vanessa Conley, who is our gardener. So we're very excited to talk today a little bit about our health program. And so Scott and Vanessa, welcome. Thanks for being with me today. And so can you give me a little bit of background about how long you've been with Vogel, what your role is there, what your background is, those kind of things?
I'll be 4 years in December. Kind of an interesting story. I started with the company as a temp, and the position for kitchen manager opened up, and so I took that role. And since then, in the 4 years, I've been promoted to food services manager and now the food service director. So kind of in line with my background. I've been in the culinary business for 20 plus years, but I do everything at Vogel Alcove that pertains to nutrition and food service.
So I've been at Vogel for about 2.5 years now. So my path is a little bit, so I started out at the Dallas Public Library as part of the Seed Library team, and actually Scott contacted the Seed Library about possibly doing a story time at Vogel, and I happened to be on the early childhood programming team and on the Seed Library team, so it was like a perfect synergy there. And so I came out and did some story times at Vogel. And I fell in love, of course, with the place and the kids and what we do there. And so one of the assistant directors let me know when the full-time gardener position opened up, and it was this serendipitous, and so I've been there for 2.5 years now.
I remember when we did that tour.
Yeah.
We talked on the phone for like 30 minutes, and then you came out. It was really cool.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. But as far as my background, so my degree is actually in anthropology, but I've always been fascinated by the connection between plants and people and how we use plants. Growing up, my family had a farm in East Texas, and so we raised Christmas trees. And so I grew up in Dallas, but every weekend we go to the farm, and we had our own food garden there, so I've always been growing my own food.
Terrific. Well, today we're here to talk about our health program. I mentioned that, and there are two components really of the health program. One is our health clinic that's on site with our nurses, but then it's the food service program. We provide lunches we provide 3 meals a day. We're really breakfast, lunch, and afternoon snack for all the kids, and we actually know that that's probably with the kids that we serve, that's most of the nutrition that they're going to be receiving. And it's so important to everything else we do. Hungry kids can't learn. So that program is extremely important to what we do. So Scott, can you just tell us a little about the food service program, what it entails, and a little bit about how you manage that program?
Sure. I always like to start off with some fun kind of numbers. And so at the moment, we serve about 800 meals a day, and that's breakfast, lunch, and snack, and that's through our main location and then our other location and summer camp. Well, if you put that in a larger scale, that's about 130,000 meals a year. Mm-hmm. And if you want to take it on a little bit more fun level, that's 14,000 gallons of milk a year.
Oh, gosh.
And about it's like 300,000 pounds of food. So that's what I manage with a good team. I have a strong cook who's worked with me for 4 years. I have a great dishwasher, and then also our delivery prep who, as a team, we really just push this together and we bust it out every day. But as far as like the direction that we go as what Vogel wants is what we want for these kids is made from scratch. We have a farm to early childhood program that we use. Just like you said, we don't know what these kids are going to be eating when they leave. So we want to make sure that we're providing them with nutrition while they're here. so that they're, like you said, if they're in survivor mode, they're not going to learn. So one of the things that we do is make their bellies feel full and make them leave happy.
Well, one of the ways that we actually fund the program is through the USDA food program that people's tax dollars help to pay for. So can you talk to us a little bit about the USDA food program, what the requirements are, what we have to do to meet the requirements so that we can get reimbursed for the food?
Right. So USDA has a certain guidelines to follow where you have to have a certain amount of components for each meal. So for lunch, for example, you have to have a grain, you have to have a meat or a meat alternative, a vegetable, or a fresh fruit or vegetable. So we have to plan the menu out to have all of those things. You can do casseroles and stuff like that, but I find with all of our kids, they're kind of weirded out about casseroles and stuff. So I just try to do individual components and stuff like that. Today was teriyaki chicken and then some rice and some vegetables. And that's how I came up with those numbers, is you also have to have a specific serving. You can't just throw, an ice cream scoop on the plate. It has to be like 2 ounces or 3 ounces, depending on the time of the day, depending on what the ounce is. And then, you just want to make sure that they're getting the correct amount, because, too much bread can turn into too much sugars, and then too much vegetables can not have them eat their meats and stuff like that.
So with that program, there's also the whole issue of that we have to have, again, you're dealing with little kids, and they have some of them are picky, some of them have allergies, and all those, some don't eat pork, some don't, all those things about it. So how do you keep track of all of that?
So I have a huge dry erase board that I write down all of the allergies. It has the classrooms, it has specifically what they're allergic to, and then what we can substitute. Here's where it becomes fun, though. For the infants and some of the smaller kids, when they're having something different, they don't really notice that. But when you get into the larger classrooms and they're eating pizza or something, and someone is allergic to cheese, and you give them, something that doesn't have cheese on it, they're like, why am I having something different? Here's where it's been fun for me is I found vegan cheeses that taste great, vegan cream cheeses. One of our students is gluten-free, so I've found gluten-free bun, gluten-free bread. So even if there's a hamburger that day, he's not even going to notice, because he's eating exactly the same thing, because they will snatch the other kids' food. So you want to make sure it looks exactly the same. And that's where it's been fun researching and trying to find where I can get something for these kids without it being different. Because these kids, some of them might already be isolated as it is, and that's the last thing we want to do, is feel them isolated in a place where they should feel the safest,
Exactly.
So
what would you say are the kids' favorite things they like to eat?
Favorite things. They love the grilled cheese and my tomato soup, which is fun because I have a gluten-free bread with dairy-free cheese, and won't even notice. So they love the grilled cheese and tomato soup, but my cook, Alandria, she makes these chicken legs, and it's the seasonings from a recipe from like her family. So we do that with green beans and mashed potatoes and a dinner roll or something like that. It's the funniest because you'll go into these rooms and the kids have drumsticks in their hands and they're eating them. So that, and then the spaghetti, turkey spaghetti, like that too. So those 3 things are the most requested.
And one of the things with our program is, some programs are very specific about, well, you get this much bread, this much whatever, like you said, USD requires it. But our kids eat till they're not hungry.
Right.
And so we always, you always make extra so that the kids can eat. But we also do something that's called family style dining. So can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important?
And that's interesting. You mentioned it was full bellies. USDA is like, you can overserve your children. And I think that's really admirable for them to think that way, because if a kid wants to eat more, let them eat more. That's good nutrition on their brain, on their bodies. And then the family style dining kind of helps with that. So you will portion for the rooms. It's like going out to a dinner where everything is served, the sides and the dinner table, and everybody passes around. It's great for conversation. It's great for the kids to hear about their days. It's great to see how they interact with the students next to them. It's an all above thing on just teaching the kids how to eat, how how to kind of learn how to eat when they're outside. So
Well, Vogel's expanding, and so we've now opened the north location, and south will be by Redbird will be opening soon in the fall. So we've kind of come to the decision, instead of how do we, we've been used to just doing the main location, and so now your task is to figure out, really kind of turn into a commissary kitchen that can then send meals out to the other sites. So talk a little bit about what process you've had to go through to try to get that up and running.
Well, I remember when Vogel North was opening up, we looked at a food service company originally to just cater up there. And then after consulting with that person, the person was like, well, your numbers are too low for me to kind of, be able to do that. Why don't you do it yourself? So we looked at that and wrote out a plan, and hey, when are we opening? And then we opened up with like, I think 10 kids. So that really helped with BAM, instead of 100 kids. It's been able to pivot and pivot and pivot. So we hired a delivery driver who comes in and preps all of our stuff, and then they deliver. We've had to do some redesign in the kitchen. I took out a prep table, I added a warmer, kind of had to start lunches a little bit earlier. That's why we needed the warmer, to be able to hold our stuff at an optimal temperature. But with this new one, it's going to be the attendance of the size we have here. So there's going to be a little bit of a fun thing we have to do. Is, so instead of just portioning it on site and then taking it up to north, we're actually going to put them in large catering pans and then portion at Redbird. Roll them in. So it will mimic exactly the way Maine is, as far as the carts going into the classrooms and serving that way. So yeah, it's going to be interesting once we get closer, but that beautiful building and kitchen is going to help out. So.
Yeah, and so we've had to work as we worked with the architects to design the new spaces, because we didn't want to you start building kitchens in new spaces and your costs go exponentially up. You got to deal with all kinds of regulations and permits and all kinds of stuff. So we've created warming kitchens in each of the new sites, and so we'll be working that out. And I know what you do is you just go up once a day, though, because we do 3 things. Right. So can you talk a little bit about how you manage that? So we only go up once a day, but we give 3 meals.
Yeah, that one, it was has been fun also. So the way we do our delivery execution is we serve lunch, snack, and then breakfast for the next day. So that's what we're delivering, and we'll be doing that for both sites. So here's where it can be a little interesting is, if you want to do eggs or something like that, well, the next morning those eggs aren't going to be good. Right. So you primarily need to do colder items that are shelf stable, stuff that will hold in the fridge. Even though you have a warmer, it's not a microwave, it's not an oven. It would take way too long to be able to actually serve good food to get it to that temperature. So one of my jobs is researching what is good cold and where's the variety. Mm-hmm. Well, at the top of your head, you're like, well, that's cereal and muffins maybe. And you're like, well, the kids can't have that every day. So I've made homemade muffins, different flavors, homemade breads like blueberry bread, banana breads, French toast sticks. I've actually partnered with a new company that is primarily focused with schools. Mm-hmm. And the variety of stuff that they have brought to me has been astronomical. And the feedback that I'm getting from the director from the north, they're eating everything. So it's a lot of fun. And it gives me more of a positive outlook for when Redbird opens up, because we're not just serving cereal and yogurt every day to them. Right.
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about that we were a farm to table program, can you describe a little bit what that means and what that? In a minute, we're going to talk a little bit about how we got to grow the stuff. That's Vanessa's job over there, but talk a little bit about how you work with that in terms of implementing the farm to table program.
Farm to table, or in our industry, it's farm to early childhood. Is taking food from local vendors, local farms, local ranches, and implementing that into your recipes. Fortunately for us, we also have a garden on site, so our gardener, Vanessa, and I get together, come up with a harvest plan, talk about recipes, what she's going to harvest that day, and I implement those in our recipes. The reasoning for schools to implement that is it promotes healthier eating. Processed food isn't the best for kids. Some people say, what's the matter if they're eating processed food? But if you think about it, if you serve processed food every day, that's not good. So we really focus on having fresh fruit and vegetables from our garden. Also partner from a few places outside of our organization to just supplement the poundage that we need to. But it's a lot of fun,
Great. So again, what kind of how do you go about integrating that into the curriculum that the kids are doing?
So and she can go in a little bit more in depth on the growing and stuff like that. But as far as with my job, we just display the fruits and vegetables as best as we can. If it's something that's a little bit different, I'll go into the classrooms and cut them up with them so they can see that. And hell, that was the tomato that she just picked with me. We can kind of do that. There's also a program that I'm implementing called Eat, Play, Grow, where it's a very fun thing where if it's tomatoes that month, she'll harvest them. We'll go all the way to like making salsa. Oh, okay. And that'll really expand them on.
Well, so Vanessa, you're the heart of this program in order to be able to do that. And the fact that we have a gardener is very unique. You don't have, most early childhood programs don't have their very own gardener. So we're very excited that we have that. And so talk to us a little bit about the Farm to Table or Farm to Early Childhood program that you do and how you believe it impacts children's growth and development.
Right. So I was a very picky eater as a child. So I sympathize with our fellow picky eaters. I was that kid that had all my food separated on the plate. But the one thing I consistently ate was stuff that we grew in our garden. So I think that's one of the number one impacts is that kids are more like, I think it's like the statistics like 40 to 50% more likely to eat something if they've been part of the growing process, because they can see and they have that pride of ownership. Like, I grew that, I'm gonna at least try it, and it could take, 8 to 10 times for children like being exposed to new foods before they actually.
30.
Is it 30? Okay.
Yeah, 30. Closer to 30, which.
Right, but like when they're interacting with it, like they're smelling it, they're touching it, they see how it's harvested. Like carrots by far have been the favorite thing to harvest. They all wanted to eat them out in the garden. I'm like, oh no, we need to take those to Mr. Scott so he can like wash them and prep them for us. But yeah, when they're out there and they see it growing, they're definitely more likely to try it. So we use organic methods in the garden. So the healthier your soil is, the more nutrients are actually going into the food. So instead of there's still nutrients in industrial grown food, but when you're growing it in a more like biodynamic and organic way, there's actually more nutrients in that food. If you've ever tasted a store-bought tomato and a fresh tomato, like fresh from the garden, it's two totally different experiences. And so a kid who maybe only ever had that sad, grocery store tomato, who says that they don't like tomatoes, if they try one that's fresh from the garden, I just had camp kids out there yesterday helping me they were actually wanted to help me pull weeds, which was nice. But they're like, can we try these tomatoes? I'm like, yeah, sure, just rinse them off. We have a hose out there, just rinse them off. And yeah, they were eating the fresh tomatoes right out of the garden. But as far as like working with Scott, so like he said, we'll coordinate, what's seasonal, what his plans are for the meals, what, aligns with the CFP, meal plan and everything. And then we'll grow it and take it in. But yeah, I think definitely seeing the kids, giving them the ownership and being part of it is really key for them to try new things and to, we actually can grow more things than are usually available too. So grow some unusual varieties, some things you may not see in the store. And a lot of our kids, live in areas of low food access, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of those are the shelf-stable foods, like he talked about, the processed foods. They're not the fresh fruits and vegetables. So they may not get exposure to the fresh fruits and vegetables outside of our program.
You're right.
So let's talk a little bit about the garden, which is awesome. And so can you kind of walk people through what it looks like and how it's organized and kind of what you're growing now?
Yeah, so we kind of have like 3 different garden zones. One of them is where I call the Big Kids Playground, but that's kind of our market garden. So that's primarily where I grow stuff for the kitchen. Some of the times the kids will help me harvest over there as well. But it's kind of like a safe space because it was a learning curve coming to Vogel and gardening with littles, because everything, is pullable.
Right, exactly.
So having a space, a safe space where the plants will not get pulled up is good. And then I have another area, our backyard area, where we grow sensory plants, so things to like stimulate their senses and stuff, and also where they can plant themselves and they can harvest themselves and watch that plant grow from the seed all the way. So our carrots, we let some of them go to seed, so they are seeing it from seed all the way to it producing a new seed, so they see the full life cycle of that. And then we have a kind of a nature, like native plants area too, and that provides some sensory stuff too, because there's like things that are soft to touch. You can like listen to the leaves rattle. They get exposed to some of our native plants here in Texas, and it's kind of the full garden experience.
One of my favorite things about the garden, especially this time of the year, I guess it'll be soon, is the sunflowers.
Oh yes,
So
they're actually blooming now. Yes, those are great. The kids like to watch them grow because they get so tall. They're great for the wildlife. The birds will visit them and eat the seeds from them. But they're actually also kind of serve as a trap plant. So not to get too deep into the weeds of gardening. So the stink bugs are attracted to them. So if you have sunflowers, the stink bugs will go there and not get on like your tomatoes and other things. So they're kind of like a trap crop as well. And they provide shade for your garden because they're nice and big. So we have some in the front that are a little bit struggling with the heat, but I think we're going to get cooler weather next year. Next week. Mm-hmm. So it will cool off a little bit. And
so what are you growing right now?
Right now, all right. So we have tons of tomatoes that are about to be ripe. I grew like 50 or 60 pounds of tomatoes last year. So tomatoes, we have some peppers. So we have sweet peppers for the kids, and then I grow hot peppers to give to the parents because, they're probably...
I used some of the peppers the other day in a dish.
Oh, those are the banana peppers, yeah.
Worked out great.
Yeah, so peppers, what else we have? So our squash and our watermelons haven't produced yet, but we have those growing. We have some cucumbers that are going to be ready soon. I like to grow a variety called Armenian cucumbers. So they're technically a melon, but they taste like cucumbers, and they get bigger, and so they're easier for them to use in the kitchen. And you don't really have to peel them like you do like some of the other ones. And then a new thing this year I'm very excited about. I've never grown popcorn. Even myself, I've never grown popcorn. So if you see some dead corn plants in the back.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Those are there for a reason because you actually have to dry them on the plant. And so it's little pink, they're actually pink popcorns. It won't pop pink. So next week is the last week of summer camp, so we're hoping to pop some popcorn with the summer camp kids.
I'll have to try that.
So I'm gonna have the little kids help me like take the kernels off and stuff because they can't have popcorn, but at least the older kids, like maybe the 5-year-olds will get to try some too, but they'll get to be part of the process of seeing this is where popcorn comes from. And a lot of people don't realize, I didn't realize for a long time, it's a different variety of corn than versus growing like sweet corn or your corn for animal feed. So it's a whole different type of corn. It actually has a high moisture content, so that's why you get the nice pop with it. So
that's cool.
That'll be a lot of fun.
So I know you also start with the kids inside with some plants. So can you talk a little bit about the seedlings and how you go about doing that?
So again, showing kids the full life cycle of a plant. So we have grow lights inside. Those were here when I got here, so I think Mr. Scott may have been responsible for securing us those. Yeah. So we start with the seeds inside under the grow light. So tomato plants, I know it seems really early, but you start those in February. So next month, I'll actually start all of our winter crops, like our cabbage, our cauliflower, all those kind of things that like the cooler weather. So in Texas, you kind of you can mostly grow year round. So in the summer, it's just keeping things alive, and in the winter, it's keeping things from getting frozen. We start with the seedlings, and that way the kids, when they walk by, they can see them growing, and then they go outside to our greenhouse, and then they'll go out into the garden. So it's they get to see, again, the whole process of going from planting a little tiny seed to going to the greenhouse and going to the yard.
So if there could be parents listening today to this podcast, so what advice would you give them we talked about, if you've got kids that are picky eaters, sometimes just to get them to help grow their own stuff, how much more apt they are to try things. So what would be your advice on a mom that's not necessarily a master gardener about how to get started and what kind of things they might want to start with with their kids to grow?
Right, so one of the easiest things to grow indoors, because I know a lot of our parents have limited space. They may be in an apartment or another living facility where, so if you have a sunny window, you can grow lettuce inside. It's really easy. Or radishes also. They grow in small spaces. They don't need as much light as some of the other plants. And they grow quickly, which with little kids, quick is important because patience is not always there yet. It's a process. So yeah, lettuce and radishes would be my two I would recommend if you just have an indoor space. Outdoors, you can actually grow in 5-gallon buckets, which a lot of places, you know, if they're getting rid of them, they'll give them for free. Just drill some holes in the bottom, fill them up. You can grow tomatoes, peppers. You will need like an outdoor space for those because they need like 8 to 10 hours of light a day. But if you have like a patio or, you know, a balcony, you can grow them out there. And again, seeing the kids see that process. But as far as like if you don't have the time or the access for that, there's a lot of community gardens in Dallas. You know, and a lot of neighborhoods that have problems with food access have started community gardens in their area. So I would recommend taking them out to your local community garden, you know. A lot of the farmers markets do double SNAP points, so you get double your dollars for SNAP. So go to your local farmers market, you know, use your SNAP there, talk to the farmers there. They get to see the fresh vegetables and, you know, stuff that the farmers are growing, you know, get to talk to the farmer. So, or they can come visit the backyard. And I'm always happy to take people on tours and talk their ears off about the plants that are growing.
Well, you mentioned the backyard, and we called our whole area the backyard. The gardens we've talked about is part of that. There's much, much more to the Nature Explorer classroom that we have. It's actually very intentionally created. It didn't just happen. There's nothing, it has to be all natural. So there's nothing that's not natural except the AstroTurf on the hills. And we had to go that route because it's 105 in Dallas. So we would have ended up with just mud hills or no grass at all. So, but everything else is natural. But there are different components of that outdoor classroom. It is a classroom. It is certified every year by the Arbor Foundation, and there are very few in this area that have that certification. So we're really proud of it. So can you describe the different components of the outdoor classroom and then how you actually go about working with the kids? They think they're coming to outdoor play, but it's actually an outdoor classroom.
Right. So we do some scheduled like planned activities with them, but also a lot of it's led by the kids' curiosity. Like when they ask me questions like, what is that bird doing over there? You know, so I kind of let the kids lead a little bit because if they're curious about something, they're more open and willing to learn from it. But just being outside is the number one benefit, you know, for the kids and using outdoor classroom. But we have like a messy area where they can like dig. We have an outdoor mud kitchen where they can pretend to cook. They make all kinds of spectacular, usually ice cream,
Yeah.
or pizza, and sometimes soup. But
Right.
those are the things they like to create with all the outdoor plants. So again, I mentioned earlier, there's sensory items. So there's stuff they can smell. We have herbs growing out there. We have things that are textural that they can play with. They can observe. We have, when I first got there, the kids were terrified of dragonflies. And now they actually look for the dragonflies because I explained to them they eat mosquitoes. You know, they help, you know, keep us safe out there. We also have some water features out there that they can interact with. And there, you know, there's the play equipment. There's some benches that they can just sit in. Kids are super creative. They always impress me with their creativity and what they came up with. We actually have this cool little gazebo, and one child decided it looked like an elevator, and so that's now all the kids call that the elevator.
Okay.
So it's you know, being out there, you know, it is like a classroom because even if it's not formal learning, there's still, you know, our focus is a lot on socio-emotional learning, right? And there's a lot of key things that they learn out there. They learn, like I talked about earlier, the patience. Like we have to watch the things grow. Seeing them make up their own rules about things. They're learning cooperation and working together in their play. There's also the fact that they're, like, especially our littles, the motor skills, right? So they're grabbing things, they're digging, they're, you know, developing those fine motor skills, and also their gross motor skills. I mean, we have kids that fall down. I mean, I'm an adult, I still fall down. But the space in the outdoor classroom allow them to kind of experience all of that. And especially some of our children that have maybe regulation issues, like being outside produces dopamine in your brain. We're hardwired to be outside as humans. So being inside all the time is not how we're meant to be. So having that outdoor time as kids just really, you know, I think gives them a more well-rounded experience. So they're able to go back to the classroom and apply some of the things they've learned outside and, you know, kind of get some of the energy out too.
And how do you work with the teachers in the classroom to kind of incorporate the inside and the outside work?
Right, so I see what they're talking about, like in the curriculum. So they had an insect, you know, unit recently. So anytime I saw an insect, it would go in a jar, so they can, you know, observe that when they come out. we have binoculars and magnifying glasses. So when they were talking about animals, we were looking for birds and squirrels. The insects, they're out there with a magnifying glass searching for insects. So anything that they're learning about, like even like storytell, we can okay, we're all Big Bad Wolf and Little Pig sometimes in the outdoor houses, just to kind of tie in with the fairy tale theme. So that, I just see what the teachers are talking about, and I try to tie in whatever we're doing outside to that.
Great. So we've talked a little bit about how the children interact with all this programming, but we also incorporate the parents. We believe in a 2-generational approach and work closely with the families of the children that are going there. So Scott, I know you do cooking classes with some of the parents, and you've also done some nutrition education. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done with the parent?
Yeah, I've done some fun cooking classes, depending on what the theme of the month is. So like Black History Month, I made a Creole for everyone and just went through the history of how it came from West Africa and made it all the way here, and how different islands on the way it incorporated, and they put their own flavors and seasonings and different proteins and stuff. So those are fun classes. All the classes are great. Nutritional ones are a little bit different because it's more of trying to show them how to cook at home and what's good for the body, what nutritions you need to eat. Also doing limited on where do you get your produce, how to hold that produce at a longer place. So you go to the grocery store and you buy some peaches and they're dead within a day. It's better to go to like the farmers markets, to be honest, because they've just been picked. But once you get home with them, what do you do with them? So I teach them on, don't put onions and bananas together because they talk to each other and they'll rot. And you want to put mushrooms in brown bags or put spinach wrapped in paper towels. And that stuff will last a lot longer, so you're not wasting your money and wasting your time. And then, just showing them different ways to cook different ingredients. It's so easy just to go get fast food and processed food. It's not as expensive to get fresh food. It just takes a little bit more work because you need a prep. So I even show people how to hold the knife, how to cut tomatoes right, and just all that kind of fun stuff that I do on a regular basis. A lot of people don't know. 1 year for Mother's Day, I made a cookbook for the mothers.
Oh, right.
Because there was the favorite items that all these kids, and they would get home and they're like, Mom, I want you to make this. So I made them a little cookbook for them to have.
So Vanessa, talk a little bit about what you do with the families.
Yeah, so getting adults outside is more challenging than getting kids outside. So a lot of the classes I do are indoors, like teaching how to container garden, again, like in limited spaces with limited resources and what you can grow. And I have had some parents that come outside, and I even had a parent volunteer with me one time and helped out. But I also, go over like how to pick produce, right? How do you tell when something's ripe? What do you do when you get home? Like, if you've never grown okra before, what do you do? Working with Scott to give them like recipes and stuff that they can use to get those items. Yeah, because it's one thing to try something new, but if you don't know how to prepare it.
Some vegetables are weirder, like okra or artichoke. If you were to just grab an artichoke and start biting it, those leaves are inedible.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah, so it is fun to teach these parents
and growing up, my mom thought all vegetables needed to be boiled, and that's not the tastiest way to prepare all vegetables. So, showing the different you can roast vegetables, you can steam vegetables. Like, there's different ways to prepare them that are not time-consuming, but still preserve the nutrition and stuff of the food.
And the way you prepare it, the best way you're going to get nutrients out of vegetables is if they're raw. Once you start cooking them, but if you boil them, it's almost all evaporating into that water. So roasting them or sauteing them some people just don't think that way.
We also grow a lot of herbs in the backyard, like basil and rosemary, and we actually have some a cutting garden in the front of the building. So if parents ever want to take some home, there's oregano and sage and rosemary out front that they can take home, because that's really expensive at the grocery store.
Well, and she gives me a bunch of basil, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? We have a dehydrator in our kitchen, so I will dehydrate our chives, our basil, all of that stuff that I can't incorporate immediately will go in there and all that. And so I'm also working on. I think they're almost done. I've got some pickles and some peppers and okra from the garden.
Yeah, definitely pickled okra is the best.
I tried one the other day. It's pretty good. So.
Great. So, well, you also do the newsletter. Talk about the newsletter that you do.
It was actually a suggestion of the teacher when I first started there. She's like, I always see the garden, and you're not always, because sometimes I'm busy working with other stuff, so I don't always get to like chat with the teachers. So like, what's going on? Like, how do I use this? So I started a newsletter that kind of goes over that things like what's going on in the garden, just some general growing guidelines. Like how do I grow this? Like what's seasonal right now? Because growing in North Texas is almost like an extreme sport because you never know what the weather is going to do. And yeah, we have some pretty warm weather. But yeah, and then usually like featured a recipe like that Scott's given me, like something that's seasonal and something maybe he's cooked in the kitchen again to like kind of tie in the kids and experience with the parents' experience.
And then we give the parents, you mentioned they can have the herbs, but we also, can you talk about how we share some of the excess that we don't need with the parents?
Yeah, so like the hot peppers I'm growing, they're actually kind of a deterrent to other insects too, so I like growing them with, my other vegetables. But, again, something that Scott can't use, like, jalapenos or serranos. So I'll put them out on the counter. Sometimes there's something, like last year, okra wasn't real popular with the kids, and so I would put out the extra. And then we had a lot of beets this year. For some reason, it was a really big beet year. So yeah, if Scott can't use it at all, I'll put it out for the parents to take home so it doesn't go to waste. We also compost, so anything, that's not used can go back into the compost and kind of start that cycle over again.
Everything that we do is we depend on the Dallas community and to help us and support us. Vogel couldn't do what we do without the generous contributions from the community. So I'm sure there's some gardeners out there or some cooks out there or somebody out there that's listening today that's probably in the back of their head saying, I wonder how I could get involved and how could I get engaged and how could I help? So can each of you tell how volunteers or in-kind donations can help us with the work that you do?
I'd say the first thing is talk about us. If you are watching this and you know what we do, talk about us. Get us out there. When I first started here, I didn't know about Vogel, and there's a lot of people are in the same boat. So just spread the word of what we do. Come and check us out. Take some tours, if anything, and just learn what we do. And as far as like volunteer work, we actually had our first volunteer in the kitchen a few weeks ago, and it was interesting because it threw our structure off, but it was so fun because he was a financial guy and he just was asking all of these questions on how much you do this, how much is this, how much does that cost, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm trying to cook here. Yeah. But any volunteer want to come in and help us out in the kitchen, more than welcome. I promise they won't wash dishes. Yeah. Be more of a conversation, and then just to see how we execute 800 meals a day.
But if there's any farmers out there listening that has extra produce, we can always absolutely use donations. I know we've been very lucky with the guy that has donated meat for us. And
yeah, we got donated a whole cow, and I'm actually reaching out as we expand our farm to early childhood to other ranchers and farmers. And luckily in Texas, the USDA guidelines on getting stuff from farmers is a little bit more lax than other states. So that really helps us to able to get more exposure to our kids on fresh vegetables and all that stuff.
Yeah, and for the garden, like volunteers, especially like we're transitioning seasons where I have to pull out a bunch of plants, the volunteers have been really pivotal. Like we've had some different organizations come out and volunteer and help, that process that's a little bit more time consuming. So that frees me up for spend a little bit more time with the kids. We've also had some very generous donations. Giving Grove gave us some fruit trees. The City of Dallas Urban Agriculture Department gave us some more raised beds. We've had a donation from Vogel Garden for some metal beds. But yeah, especially if you have compost or organic fertilizers you'd like to donate, that's always useful. Seeds are always appreciated because any extra I can give out to the families. And seeds last longer than people think. Like just because it's the expiration date on the seeds doesn't mean that seed is no longer viable. It means maybe not as many of them are viable. So even if you have old seeds, if we can't use them to plant, we can use them for art. We can use them for other things. But I know everyone who I know a lot of people started gardening in the pandemic, and maybe if you've decided that's not for you, I hope you would try it again. But if you decide it's not for you, you can always donate those supplies to Vogel, and they'll definitely get used.
Terrific. So as we wrap up, is there any last comment that you think people need to know about our food service or gardening program or outdoor classroom that we haven't talked about? Any last comments from either of you?
Eat healthy. That's going to be the best on your mental health and your body. Make sure your kids are getting supplemented with all their vitamins as far as through food, and talk to your kids also while you're eating. That's a big thing. Have your kids cook with you. I noticed with my toddler, when I cook with her, she was eating salmon that we cooked the other day. So that's a really big impression on kids, and that's what we do at our organization. So.
Yeah, the modeling is very important, because if you go, ooh, Brussels sprouts, then the kids are going to be like, ooh, I don't want to try those Brussels sprouts. And they may have different taste buds. You know, kids' taste buds change, right, as they age too. So, try to reintroduce those foods to your kids. But yeah, as far as, like you said, be healthy, just get outdoors. Spend some time outside. Screens are very tempting. I know I have to watch my screen time on my phone. But go outside for 10, 15 minutes. Get that vitamin D, enjoy the sun. Maybe 5 minutes if it's, August, but get outside, look at some birds, just observe your surroundings, hug a tree, I don't know. If you don't have the capacity to grow, become friends with people who do grow. I know my relatives got tired of zucchini and squash one year because I had my garden produce a ton of it. So get to know gardeners, because they'll always give you the extra. Just be outside with your kids. There's tons of really nice parks in the Dallas area. So go outside, and it doesn't have to be a whole day trip. Just, and again, studies show it's so key for brain development to be outside and to make those observations, make those connections, observe the cycles of nature. And it will get them, especially little kids, it will give them a head start when they get to, all the STEM and STEAM curriculum that they have.
Nothing better than eating an apple or a peach that you grew outside.
Oh,
on a summer day like today.
Nothing better than when it's still slightly warm.
It's just
so full disclosure, we grew quite a bit of blackberries. And
I love blackberries. They brought me some of those.
Yeah, more than a few of them made them into my mouth while I was harvesting them. Yes. Because again, we're all organic, so I'm like, I have to taste test to make sure
they were really good. Blackberries are my favorite.
Yeah, so definitely, there's a lot of spaces that if you don't have immediate access, you can go to get that experience that are free. Dallas also has a really extensive nature trail program too. And Trinity Audubon Center is free if you live in their zip code, and it's not real expensive if you don't, but they have beautiful trails there that you can walk in.
I just thank y'all for all that you do for Vogel, and thank you for being here today. It's some of my most precious childhood memories, because my grandfather and my father were gardeners, and so we lived on one street. My grandparents lived on the other street, but there was 2 acres between us, but that was the garden. And so we would walk through the garden through what we called the pawpaw path to my grandparents' house, but my dad and my grandfather gardened. And so I've picked my share of beans, I have pulled up my share of potatoes, and went and found the asparagus on the fence line, and so again, just eating those kind of things as growing up, it was part of my thing. My grandfather was very big in the garden club in Fort Worth, and actually I have one of my favorite articles about him is that they named him the Johnny Appleseed of Fort Worth.
That's amazing.
Because there's tons. We actually drive around Fort Worth now, and we can say Papa planted that tree, because that's what he did. He would do that. So I grew up with that and knowing how important that was in my life growing up, and still remember that. Unfortunately, I haven't taken a lot of those skills to me in adulthood, but I know it was a huge part of my childhood and so important to do that. So that's why I love the program that the two of you do, because I think it's so important that kids, especially kids in an urban environment, have that opportunity that otherwise they wouldn't have. So thank you so much for what you do. So again, thank you for joining us for episode 6 of the Vogel Voices podcast. To find out more information about Vogel and how you can get involved in not only our gardening and food service program, but all of our programs, go to our website, www.vogelalcove.org, and you can get all kinds of information. But we would love to have you come down, have your garden club come down, or your church group or anybody else come down and see our gardens, and also see the other important programs like Scott mentioned, just to find out what Vogel does. So we would love to have you come and visit, and we might even give you some basil or blackberries before as you leave. So we'd love to have you come down and visit us. So again, thank you for joining us on this podcast. We hope that you can come back, and we also hope that you will subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any of the episodes, and also you can rate this podcast and review it as well. So until next time.